There we are. We are live. And I will give a few moments for our participants to start coming in. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is the Metropolitan Black Bar Association's monthly Leap Career Forum, where we talk to practitioners in a specific practice area. And this month it is tax law. Thank you so much everyone for joining us today. I know we still have a few people who are coming in from the waiting room, so I will just give it a hot minute. It's 6:32. I am going to open this back up at 6:33 and we will just wait a little bit. And so in the meantime, actually, while we're waiting, I'm going to let everybody know we do have the chat function available for you today. We would love for you to use the chat function to make comments, to say amen, anything that strikes you, and also to use the Q&A function to ask our panelists questions. We will be monitoring the Q&A function so that we can ask the questions as we proceed during the panel. We will not leave them until the end of the panel. This is going to be a very candid, very informal session. We have some absolutely amazing panelists today that I am so blessed to have here with us. It's going to be a great conversation. And so with that, I am going to get started, and I'm not going to read the bios for all of our panelists. I have just placed in the chat a Google document where you can see the full bios. But what I will ask our panelists to do is to introduce themselves. And first, I want to actually say thank you to Jerome Hughes and Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I'm going to butcher it, right? I'm going to butcher it. Elizabeth Nwabweze, who are our co-chairs of the MBBA tax law section, who helped us put this fabulous, fabulous panel together. So with that, I'm going to have both Elizabeth and Jerome in turn introduce themselves, and then we will start with the rest of our panelists. And so your prompts for your introduction are: tell us your law school, and also big up your undergrad if you wish. Also, let us know your current title, your practice area, where you are affiliated. And then you're going to tell us something fun about yourself. And I promised I was going to embarrass myself so that you could all feel comfortable. So, and I think I may have shared this before, so some of you are familiar. So when I was about a year old, this was in Senegal. I was born in Senegal. We came here when I was 5. When I was a year old, my mother put me down and she was doing the ironing. And I'm going to have to find a picture for you, but the irons in Senegal are made out of real iron, and you put charcoal in them, and that's how you iron. And so apparently I had a nice little kissing session with the iron. So if you see me in person, I have a little scar where I kiss the iron, and it will not disappear no matter how much stuff I put on it. So see, I told you I was gonna make you feel comfortable, right? Yeah, that's a ridiculous story. So now your fun fact is gonna be amazing. So Jerome, I'm going to come to you. So law school, undergrad, current practice, and a fun fact.
Sure. Good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Jerome Hughes. My law school is Harvard Law School. I went to undergrad at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. So I'm from Alabama. And I don't have quite a fun fact, but I do want to say that I practice with, I'm an attorney with HPD, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, with the Contract Real Estate and Development team. And I just often emphasize how much tax goes through affordable housing law. So if you're interested in affordable housing law, make sure you take those partnership and corporate tax courses that you wouldn't have thought to take. So from here, I pass it to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Jerome. My name is Elizabeth Nwabweze. So Anta, you were close enough. Currently, I am a student at NYU Law School, getting my tax LLM, and my JD was American University. So shout out to them. Right now, I'm a student, but I will soon be graduating and joining PwC's M&A tax group. And a fun fact about me is I played soccer pretty much from high school until maybe the first or second year of college. So, and I was a goalie. So if there's any soccer players out there, shout out.
Ooh, very nice. Are you watching the Africa Cup or the Latin Cup? because it's on now. It's been awesome.
I have not been able to tune in. I was watching Premier League, but it's just not the same without a crowd. So
that is true. All right, so I'm going to come to you, Your Honor, Judge Courtney Dunbar Jones.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm really honored to be here. Before I give the rundown, I just want to say thank you to my family and friends who are tuning in this evening. It means the world to me to have so many family and friends who have wanted to listen in tonight. I always think it's important to acknowledge the people who got me here. I just wouldn't be here without my parents, my extended family, my Hampton family. And so I just want to thank everyone who's here this evening from my family and friend group. It means so much to me, which is a natural segue into, I went to Hampton University. I'm a very proud graduate of Hampton University. I have a story I could share some other time, but Hampton was not on my radar. And it was my grandmother and my aunt who insisted that I go to an HBCU. And so some other time I'll tell that story, but I went to Hampton University, then went to Harvard Law School. I'm now a judge on the United States Tax Court. A fun fact about me is that I am a lifelong diehard fan of one of the worst NFL teams. It's the Washington football team. And I have been cheering for them for the better part of 25 years, probably it's more like 35 years. Unfortunately, I'm not going to stop cheering for them, but I don't think it's ever going to get any better. So you can pray for me.
I love that. I love it. And believe me, your Mets and your Knicks fans feel your pain as well. So thank you for that, Judge. All right, Dr. Zach Pouga, I'm going to come to you next.
Well, thank you, Anta, and thank you for the MBBA for inviting me. Really honored to be here and to be sharing with this panel with all of you. And thanks to everyone who's been able to dial in. Zach Pouga is my name. I went to law school, undergrad in political science, and then law school in Cameroon, where I'm originally from. And then I came to the US, went to the University of Michigan for my tax LLM, and then my SJD from the University of Michigan. I'm currently a partner at Ernst & Young here in the New York City offices. And after a few years here and there, including at a law firm. Fun fact about me, I am one of 10 children from the same mother, the 6th of 10. But that's probably a fun fact about my parents. So maybe a fun fact about me is that I played soccer in college as well. So so Elizabeth, I can challenge you, and I was a forward.
Love it, love it.
Yeah.
Look at all the soccer folks, Lord. Yeah, I could tell you about the story. The one time I played soccer in Senegal, it was not pretty. All right, Lillie, I'm going to come to you next.
Thank you, Anta. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you to our members on the panel here. Nice to be with you all. My name is Lillie Nkenchor. I went to Rutgers, New Brunswick, undergrad, so go Scarlet Knights, Seton Hall Law School, and went to Georgetown for my LLM. I'm currently a trust and estates attorney, and I have my own law firm. So a fun fact is, I am currently trying to get good at roller skating. So if you have tips, please tell me, because I've twisted both ankles and I need
I love it. So do you have, is it roller blades or do you have roller skates
I'm
with
on the
four wheels?
skates. They're very
Yes.
pretty skates. They look good. They're not working right now. So I have the whole setup. I just need to get better at it.
Nice. All I can tell you is music. You have music. It makes you look like you're doing everything perfect, even when you fall. I love it. So Guy, last but not least.
Good evening, everyone. Also, thank you, MBBA, for inviting me to be on this panel. My name is Guy Joseph. I go by Guy. I graduated, like Elizabeth, from American University, Washington College of Law in DC. Currently, I'm in the as with Elizabeth, also in a few classes with Elizabeth at NYU, taking the tax LLM courses there. And I look to be starting, like Elizabeth, I look to be starting at PwC this fall, however, in the international tax group, hoping to specialize in private equity and venture capital. Fun fact about me, so a few months before COVID started, I started really getting into ping pong. So right now, I feel like my skills have much developed while being indoors. So if any ping pong players out there, I'd love to play.
God, even with the ping pong, I feel like I just missed my calling in sports, but I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. So as you can see, we have an absolutely amazing panel for us right now. And I'm so blessed to be among all of these people, because as we know, there are not a lot of Black and Brown folks in tax, IP, trust and estates, right? There are niche practices in which we really are, missing in that particular environment. So it is just such an honor to be able to have individuals who are not only in the industry, but they are experts and they have reached the upper echelon of their careers. So we could not have asked for a fabulous panel. So with that, just to give people just a little taste about what we are talking about when we talk about tax law, I would love for each of you in your respective areas to talk about what tax law is for you. And Zach, I'm going to come to you because I just love what you do. And also you have, both the law firm and now the Big Four experience.
Well, thank you for that. And that's a big question, and probably that will go a long way in getting a lot of people listening maybe interested, is that tax law is so wide, it's so large, and in my opinion, so exciting in so many different ways. I do international tax, and which is really trying to determine the person's tax when you include in many jurisdictions, many countries. And when I say person, I'm speaking about individuals, but also corporations. So for me, when I talk about international tax law, I'm always looking at the transnational aspect. On the one hand, I'm looking at the country-specific tax laws, but how they interact when you add in other jurisdictions in other countries. But I'm always looking at the cross-border aspect. What is the other side and what does that do to the US tax law? So I'm a US international tax lawyer. I look at US tax laws, but I put in a layer of international. What happens when we go cross-border? What is the impact on my tax liability and my tax exposure on the US tax law when I look in factor in another country? And I do that with my colleagues as well, who are from other countries, who will be maybe looking at the French international tax law. When a French corporation comes into the US or has any interaction with the US whatsoever, what is the impact on the tax in determining their tax exposure, their tax liability, their tax responsibility? So, international tax is mostly tax for the country, but looking at it from a cross-border perspective and what is the impact.
And that's so important for a lot of us, right? Because like me and you and so many of us on this panel, we or our family members, right, may have property in other countries, right? And so understanding how the jurisdictions work with one another is great. Thank you so much for that. So yeah. Lillie, I'm going to come to you.
Those are usually the good examples, right? When we know that we have, and in many circumstances, when it becomes interesting is when you actually don't know the cross-border aspect of your transaction or of your assets and
yeah, when your clients actually tell you the truth, right, about what they have. Yes. So Lillie, I'm actually going to come to you because I think you and Zach also, sort of cross paths sometimes, right, in your practice, in your estate planning.
Yeah, it's funny when you were talking, Zach, I was like, oh yeah, I need to call Zach about something. So I, as a trust and estates attorney, I focus on tax planning as it relates to estates. We all know when you're thinking about tax planning, you're paying attention to the subject, right? Individuals are being taxed, so that's individual tax. Corporations are taxed, so that's corporate tax, partnership tax. Estates can also be taxed. So when that happens, I'm really looking at the total value of my client's assets, both domestic and abroad, and trying to, one, create strategies that will minimize their taxation before they pass away. And then two, when you can't avoid a tax, when you're so lucky that you're so wealthy that you can't avoid the estate tax anymore, what are some funding vehicles? What are some financial instruments that we can use to pay the tax for pennies on the dollar? So that's really the type of tax planning that I focus on.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And that's, of course, my realm, what I used to practice in. So I'm very, very familiar. So Jerome, you dug in just a little bit on sort of what the tax area means for you in your practice. So can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. I didn't realize I was on panel, but
yes, because you bring so much to it. I wanted to just get you in there.
No, I think so affordable housing development is really infused with sort of tax issues. Like a basic, they use a partnership form, and which implicates partnership taxation to put property into. So that's sort of a starting point for most affordable housing deals. And then in addition to that, like in our area, we use the low income housing tax credit. It's one of the most important instruments for the provision of affordable housing. And so knowing about tax credits requires knowing a little bit about sort of the tax code. And then in addition to that, you have a number of sort of local exemptions that are important, local tax exempt, property tax exemptions that you have to be, and abatements that you have to be sort of attentive to. So tax is important, very important for our area. So for my area.
Agreed. Thank you for that. So Guy, I'm going to come to you before I go to Judge Jones, because she sees everything, right? So I'd be interested to hear, because since you're currently a student, right, getting your tax LLM, and you're going to PwC, I'd love to hear, what sort of things that you see and what tax law areas that, come to you.
So currently at NYU, they do a broad array of different tax courses, whether it's from the corporate side or from the individual side or property side of individuals. We kind of see hypotheticals of them, so they're not real world cases, although we do read some cases to kind of cement our knowledge in them. But it's been more so from a broad view. This past semester has been a little bit more specific, taking classes in private equity tax and also mergers and acquisitions tax. So that has been quite fun and interesting. But from what I understand, it's going to be a whole different ballgame once the ball gets rolling at PwC. So I'm excited for that. That's
where Zach comes in. Zach can give you more, right?
Absolutely.
So Judge Jones, I'm going to come to you, because since you sit in the tax court, you were telling us earlier that you started in nonprofit, but you basically see everything in the tax law area.
Yes, the tax court was designed by Congress to be the single prepayment forum, and our court has national jurisdiction over the federal tax code. And so what that means is that an individual or a corporation that has a dispute with the IRS about their tax bill can file a petition in the United States Tax Court anywhere in the country and pay $60 without having to pay the disputed amount, and they will have a federal tax case here at the court. We have petitioners who have a dispute for as little as $500, $300, and right now we have pending before us a multi-billion-dollar case with Facebook. Just 2 months ago, our court issued an opinion in a multi-billion-dollar case with the Coca-Cola company. It's an international tax case. So everything from the simplest Schedule C type of thing, where you have someone who says, well, I work at home and I can take a business deduction on a certain percentage of the square footage of my home. That's a pretty straightforward case. And we have all the way to the Coca-Cola transfer pricing, which runs into the billions of dollars. We have the full, complete Internal Revenue Code. It's Title 26 of the United States Code, and we have a jurisdiction over all of it. Lillie talked about the estate taxes and gift taxes. That's part of our jurisdiction. Income taxes is part of our jurisdiction. And as Anta mentioned, I backed into a career in tax law because I was engaged and in love with exempt organizations, tax exempt organizations. And so we have jurisdiction over the whole thing. But I hope that that gives you some sense of how close the tax court is to everyday people, and at the same time, how complicated and complex our docket can be.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Because I think, especially for those who are not in this area, and just for laymen, right, we don't really know the complexity. We always hear that the tax code is, you know, being re-envisioned and restructured, but we don't really understand the extent of it. And so I think, like, the way that I was before I got into this area was like, tax, boring, no thank you, right? And so I'd love for people to hear, for our participants to hear about how you got into the tax field, right? Why did you choose it? What is it that appeals to you about this particular practice? So Lillie, I'm going to come to you first.
Thank you. It's interesting you found it boring. I found that it had an answer. Like, all the other classes were very like, oh, it depends upon the jurisdiction and the day that the petition is filed. I was like, so what's the answer? And tax had an answer. And it could also be my science background, which also, generally speaking, has an answer. So I was attracted to the fact that, yes, the code is complicated. It feels like they write it purposefully so you don't understand it. But once you can break it down into a formula and add numbers to it, it has an answer. And that's what was really attractive about it for me, coming from my background.
Love it. So Zach?
Yeah, and it's really refreshing to hear that you say it has an answer, because I thought so until I got into international tax, where most things don't have an answer, which makes it, you know, part of the excitement about it, not having an answer all the time and trying to come up with one. How I got into tax, and I love my corporate lawyers colleagues. I love my contract lawyer colleagues. I started as a corporate lawyer. I started as a contract lawyer. And I was mostly doing oil and gas contracts. But I was doing that for just about a year, and I got out. And the reason I got out is because every time I was sitting around the table, and the people who were doing what I was doing, we were the least interesting people at the table, right? The most interesting people at the table were the people who were doing international tax, because these were big, large oil and gas companies doing their planning around the world with 5,000 different entities and corporations. And the international tax lawyers sitting at the table were coming up with this really interesting, intellectually challenging and thought-provoking kinds of structures and ideas. And they always like captivated the attention of the client. And it was the most fascinating parts of the discussion. And I was sitting there reviewing the contracts, making sure that the comma is in the right place. And I thought that wasn't exciting enough. So I decided to get out of contract law, went back to school, and I got my international tax LLM, and I got into international tax. And I have to say, I have not regretted it. It's been extremely enjoyable. And if you know tax law is complex, right? And when to that, you just add the cross-border aspect to it. You add the different countries' approaches to it. You add the different jurisdictions' understanding of it and design of it. It makes it just something very intellectually stimulating. And that's what really keeps my blood flowing. And that's what I was looking for. So that's how I got into international tax.
Wow, that is incredible. So Judge, can you talk to us about your experience? I know I gave a little sneak peek earlier.
Sure. I did not set out to become a tax lawyer. Like Lillie, I do have a hard science background. My bachelor's degree is in computer science, and in all candor, I chose that major because it required so much math and physics, and I just enjoy the way that my brain works when I'm engaged in that kind of discipline. But I didn't set out to become a tax lawyer. That was not my goal. I really wanted to be a nonprofit organization lawyer. And I was recruited by a boutique firm right out of law school. They had a practice in nonprofit organizations and charities that really intrigued me. And as soon as I got there and started looking at the matters that the clients had questions about, it was evident it was about the fact that they were tax exempt organizations. They had recognition, or they were seeking recognition under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. They had other interesting things going on that implicated the possibility of unrelated business income tax. If they were a private foundation, a grant-making organization, they had concerns about the excise taxes under Chapter 42. And so I found myself a tax lawyer because I wanted to be a nonprofit organization lawyer. And as I got into it, I enjoyed the discipline of it. There is a rigor to it. And it's initially intimidating. And I can understand why a lot of people avoid it, because it is complex, it is rigorous, it is initially intimidating. But if you can push through the initial complexity and the rigor of it and find an aspect of it that is interesting to you, you will actually find it is fascinating. It is, in my view, one of the most fascinating areas of law. And I saw a question in the chat that I wanted to answer. Someone was asking, how can you serve the community from a Big Four perspective or from a law firm perspective? At the tax court, we have tax law clinics all over the country. Many of them are connected to local law schools. There is a very active tax law clinic in New York City and in the New Jersey area. And you can, if you are admitted to practice before the tax court, or even if you are willing to enter a limited entry of appearance, so you don't have to sign on to someone's case for the duration, but there are opportunities to serve as volunteer lawyers. And the local clinics offer training. You can help a single mom who's in a dispute with the IRS about her earned income tax credit, whether or not she had custody of her kids for the time period that she's indicated on her return. I mean, these are very kitchen table issues. And if you're passionate about helping everyday people, I had a case, it was pending before me. The posture of it was a motion for summary judgment. But the petitioner in the case included as an attachment to his petition a medical report. And basically what he said to me is, Judge, I fell behind on my taxes because I lost my medical license. I lost my medical license because I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And the state medical board required me to surrender my medical license once I had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And because of our taxpayer clinics, I was able to connect that taxpayer to a volunteer lawyer who worked on the case with the IRS and worked to a resolution. And I just offer that as an example of how it's everyday people with real life things going on. Maybe they should have their case resolved by the court, and I'm always prepared to try cases and resolve motions for summary judgment and resolve discovery disputes and all the rest. But I do offer, there are real ways to help real people with everyday situations. Tax law touches everybody. So that's my pitch, and I'll stop there.
No, but that's fantastic. And thank you so much for bringing that up. And I think it was Del Reese that thank you for asking that question, because I know when we talk about pro bono, sometimes it seems as if you have to be, in a law firm or a solo practitioner to really volunteer, but these are the exact issues that we see every single day in our communities, right, that we can address. And one thing I know that NYU has a strong tax clinic, and also just recently, Jerome and Elizabeth, were able to have the MBBA put together the first VITA clinic, volunteer income tax assistance. So there are definitely opportunities for you to be able to volunteer and to provide services to the underrepresented in the tax area, because as the judge said, it affects every single one of us. right? While we may not all be passionate about it and may not, be as invigorated in reading the code, it affects every one of us, whether we like it or not, unfortunately, right? What do they say? Death and taxes, right? We remember that. So, and thank you for saying that also, Judge, because I know that nonprofit area is one area where, the Black community is very powerful, right? But we don't always have the assistance that we need. And I think it's also an area where there are not a lot of Black and Brown practitioners. And I'm not sure what the reason is. It could be maybe, we don't have access to the resources. We don't understand that there's, programs out there that can help us give us the knowledge that we need to practice in this area, right? But when you think about it, churches, right? What are churches, right? Our churches always need help, regardless of where we are, right? We form nonprofit organizations, community service programs that can qualify as a nonprofit organization. And while much of it is tax heavy, it's what we need. And I agree with Judge Jones. It's a very invigorating. It's one of the first areas that I did fall in love with, nonprofit and tax and governance, and it can do so much for our communities. So with that, I'm going to come to you, Guy, because since you are doing your LLM, I wanted to know what is it that attracted you to the tax practice, and why did you decide to go for your LLM in tax?
So this has a lot to do with what Judge Jones just mentioned about tax clinics and being from around the area. So while at AU, I participated in the tax clinic there, got credit, and it was this one particular case where I had a client that turned out that she had to pay taxes on her scholarship. And after doing research and finding out that this wouldn't have happened had she had something called a 529 plan. So finding out the disparity, and we already know that there's income disparity between whites and Blacks, but there's also a disparity between what you pay in taxes between whites and Blacks. So that kind of sparked my interest in tax law. And from there, I decided to go to NYU and take the LLM course there. And also from there, just being bombarded by so many interesting topics, especially private equity, which is what I'm interested in.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for that point and sharing that. Because as you know, so I got my LLM in tax also from NYU. And so I want to address Del Reese's question, right? If we have advice for LLM students graduating and entering Big Four, right? And how they can build greater rapport in the first year and position themselves for promotion and beyond. And Zach, I want to direct that question to you because, because of your background, you've been at the law firm, you're now at Big Four, you have your LLM. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, thanks. And that's I forgot to mention that I started at EY actually after my LLM, still here in New York. So I was at EY for my first year, and then I was there for 3 years before going to a law firm. You just gotta at a Big Four. The fortunate thing is we have a lot of experience. We have a lot of bright people, right? We have a lot of in every single area you can think of. That's the power that we bring at the table because we are so big. We are fortunate that we have people who are really good every single area you look. So when you come in as a first year at a Big Four, of course, you have to deal with very, very talented people. But what I always say is you have to find a way to make yourself different, to make yourself remarkable, because you're in a sea of talent, you see of a lot of people. You have to find a way to stand out, and that's usually the difficult part. And to do that, usually it's technically. You have to technically set yourself apart. You have to make sure that you don't come in your first year knowing everything there is about whatever tax of law, area of tax you choose to practice. But when you come in, you have to make sure you take everything seriously, right? The small assignment that is given to you, take it as if you were to win the Super Bowl, right? Because the produce you're gonna give to the person who's giving you the assignment is gonna define who you are and whether the person comes back to you. And when you start developing that reputation about yourself, that's what will determine your success. I was at EY the first year, and I was early promoted at the end of 1 year, just because and I have to say, I wasn't just out of school. I had a year at a law firm before. I knew a little bit how the professional world works. So you have to find a way to set yourself apart. and it can be difficult in a really big environment like a Big Four. And my advice in setting yourself apart, set yourself apart technically. And that doesn't mean you know everything, but that means you take the time to learn and make sure that everything you turn in is your Super Bowl that you're turning in, because that's how you define yourself.
So then that makes me ask the question, which I get all the time. So does that mean we absolutely need an LLM in tax? Right, and I'm going to, because as you can see, a lot of us do have that LLM. And so Lillie, what is your thinking? What is your advice? Do people have to have an LLM in tax in order to be able to practice in this area?
It depends on what area you want to practice in my professional opinion. I know that's the typical lawyer answer, depends. I did not have my LLM for quite some time because the type of planning that I was doing didn't necessarily require it. But as I started to go deeper, and that's what I mean by not only does it depend upon the discipline, but it depends upon how deeply you want to go into that discipline. And to Zach's point, if you want to be a subject or revered as a subject matter expert, the LLM, the designations, the certificates will allow you to stand out in that way and be able to use it. So I'm not going to just blanketly say it's a mandatory requirement, because we all know lots of tax attorneys who don't have the LLM. But if you want to go deep, if you want to climb the ranks of a particular law firm or a Big Four firm, and you see all the people around you have it, it might be good to get it.
Yeah, and I'll share for me, that was exactly my experience. So I started off as a corporate lawyer doing M&A. I absolutely hated it, but I had the opportunity to move into trust and estates. And when I did that, I was already a second year, and I was behind my class at the law firm, right? And so again, I only took an income tax class. I didn't know about estate tax or anything. So for me to really ramp up as quickly as I needed to, that's why I started my LLM. And it was the best thing that I could possibly do, because it really did help me dig deeper into the issues to be able to provide the advice that I needed, right? But so Judge Jones, I want to come to you, because knowing, your background, what are your thoughts if someone comes to you and says, listen, I want to do tax, or I want to be in the tax court, I want to sit on the bench in the tax court one day. Should I get my LLM in tax?
I don't have an LLM. So I struggle to tell people to do things that I haven't done. Having said that, if I could go back to the beginning of my tax career, I would have taken advantage of the opportunities that were presented to me at the time to get an LLM. I was in private practice for 7 years at boutique tax law firms. They were known for expertise in tax. And both of those law firms offered significant full tuition support. My first firm offered full tuition support if the associate went to NYU for the LLM. My second firm offered full tuition support if the associate went to Georgetown for the LLM, because both firms had relationships with those respective schools. If I could go back, rewind the clock 17 years or 16 years and be a first-year associate again and have that presented to me, I would not look that gift horse in the mouth. At the time, I thought, well, I've just come through a lot of school and school was intense and I'm ready to just be a normal person and work hard and go home. And also I was newly married and I am in love with my husband just as much today as I was then. So the idea of spending a minute away from him so that I could be involved in the Internal Revenue Code, I was not feeling that. But again, having the perspective that I have today and having made a career in tax law and having found it fascinating, and as a judge on the court, I would say that most of my colleagues require an LLM for a clerkship. So it's certainly an important credential to the tax court with respect to clerkships. So, but I want to say one thing. I do want to say one thing. Education is expensive. Education is expensive. And I am, and Hampton students, I try to do as many Zooms with Hampton students as I can. And I talk about the expense and the debt associated with education. And so that's why I want to be very honest about my story. I had the opportunity to get an LLM on somebody else's dime. And I regret not taking advantage of that opportunity early in my career. So if you have the opportunity to get an LLM and someone else, a firm, a big four firm, a law firm, or a scholarship is going to pay your way, I think that's pretty much a no-brainer. I think it's more difficult if you're talking about adding to a debt load that would already be an undergrad debt load and a law school debt load. I think that is a different calculus. You have to really have your mind made up about tax. Maybe I'm being a little too motherly right now because I have 3 kids. So
No. That's and that's actually why I asked you the question, because I want people to understand that there are different paths, there are different routes. Not everybody is the same. Some people may feel like they need the education, right? But it all depends on who you are, what you want to study, what your interests are, and what your resources are, honestly. Right. And so that's why it's important to have different perspectives. At the end of the day, you have to make the decision. But I want people to hear the different perspectives. And I appreciate all of you being very honest, because that's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna jump in, and I think that was the perfect answer there. It really depends on the area. I would say in the international tax arena, I will have to say you require an LLM. For so many reasons. One being that if you have a JD, usually you will have taken a corporate income tax, individual income tax. If you are really tax driven, maybe you have taken partnership tax. But when we're speaking about international tax, really, you do need an international tax LLM, because it is somewhat of a different ballgame, right? And if you come into a big four, most big fours, or if not all of them, will pay for you to go get an LLM, because they know you will be running a race with one leg if you did not have that foundation in international tax to come in and practice international tax. So for international tax law, I will have to go with, yeah, you should get that.
Absolutely.
And if you can get somebody to pay for that, you definitely should jump into it.
And everything Judge Jones said is exactly how I did it. Firstly, when I graduated from law school, I think I had PTSD. I said, don't call me. Don't write me. I'm not going to read. I'm not going to study ever again. So that was another reason why I was very slow to get the LLM. Secondly, I really didn't need it to perform my job well. And I didn't want to incur additional debt. So the LLM was not something that was really in my thinking. But I got rid of the debt. I got deeper into tax, and my company went 50-50 with me. And I had a manager who was really annoying me about it. So those are the reasons why I eventually got to the LLM, but I was not rushing towards the LLM.
I think that is so perfect, right? Because it really goes to what you all have said, because you have to look at the path that you're on, right? Because I actually had a friend who took a year off, got her LLM in tax, went into trust and estates, and then she hated it. And she transferred out and she went to litigation, and she spent all of that money, right? So I think it does require that you really consider everything happening around you. And it's not easy. It is not easy. I did the full 5 years. This was when, NYU still had, they have the executive program where you can do it part-time. At the time, they still had a residency requirement. So the first year, I had to take classes on campus. I had 3 kids. I was at the firm working the crazy hours. So it's not easy. It really isn't easy. So think about that. And most importantly, reach out to people who have done it or who have insight. You have 6 people on this panel right now who have all of the information that you need and the wisdom to help guide you through the decision. And that really is the purpose of why we have them here and why we have these monthly LEAP forums, because we want you to be educated. Law school, unfortunately, doesn't give you the information, right? You take the courses and then you got to figure out how to get through the profession. And so use us. We are here, you know, and I'm volunteering every single one of these people because I know they're not going to say no, right? But we're a resource, right? We are a resource. We are a community, and you can hear the passion in everyone's voices for what they do and for helping the community. So I really encourage you to do that. So I want to get to, what is it? Talk to us about a day. And I know this is a question. It's like, every day isn't the same. But for example, what did you do today? So I'm going to come back to you.
Me? Oh, so I begin every day. I'm a morning person. I know when I do my best writing and my best thinking is in the morning. I try to block out the first 3 hours of every day for deep focused work, whether it's on an opinion or on a substantive order, or I need to read through several cases. I might have to read through a Supreme Court opinion. I might have to read through a circuit opinion. Remember, the tax court is a court of national jurisdiction. And so under section 7428 of the code, if you are a petitioner and the tax court issues an opinion and you don't like the opinion, you have a right to appeal to your circuit corresponding to where you reside. So in any event, I try to set aside the morning for deep focused work. If it's opinion writing, substantive orders, or complicated circuit opinions or Supreme Court opinions, I try to just devote the morning to that. I call it defending the morning. And defending the morning includes separating myself from my personal devices. They are off and they are out of sight, because deep focused work for me doesn't happen when I'm connected with my devices. I then do calls with parties in the afternoons. Oftentimes we'll have pending motions, motion for summary judgment, motion for continuance, motion in limine, motion to dismiss, a whole variety of motions. And I'll do calls with the parties on motions in the afternoons. I do things like this in the later part of the day. I will do calls with my staff. Also in the later part of the day, if we're discussing opinions, if I'm giving feedback on orders, I try to wait until the afternoon to do email. So that's what a typical day looks like for me.
Wow, you have nothing to do, Judge. So Guy, I want to come to you, because since you're still, you know, you're doing your LLM right now. I can only imagine what it's been like, all right, with COVID and not really having that interaction. So what does your day look like? How have you been, you know, sort of planning your study, right, in order to get through the program?
So starting the program, it has been kind of challenging in making those connections that you usually make during law school or during the LLM program. But I'm fortunate to have really a good study group that Elizabeth's also a part of. So generally my days, though, these days are pretty much filled with preparing for finals. Today I was just buckling down on some mergers and acquisitions taxation, and it doesn't really get as much diverse than that. One core subject a day or two, maybe, if it's really demanding, but nothing like judges, right?
You just gave me PTSD by saying M&A, Lord. So Lillie, I'm going to come to you, because now that you, I congratulate Lillie. She just a month ago opened her own firm. I'm so proud. I can only imagine how you were dealing with clients during this time. So talk to us about a so-called typical day.
Thank you. My day is actually very similar to that of Judge Jones. I'm better in the morning. So I have a routine. I no longer kind of just wake up and go to work. I do have a routine of exercise and centering myself and meditating and all of that, so that I can, like you, how you defend your morning, Judge Jones, I defend my spirit, because there's always somebody who's ready to get in the way of that. So I'm like, not today, Satan. So I defend my spirit in the morning, and then I get to my work. So because I'm really good in the morning, I can work basically from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. and just focus on it. What am I focusing on? I'm focusing on creating your will, creating your trust. If a mistake is made, I'm going back to correct it. People die and they reach out to me and say, I need you to help me probate my mother, my father, my grandmother's estate. All the paperwork that differs amongst the different jurisdictions. I'm triple checking that. I know Anta's like, I don't want to even be involved in this. I'm triple checking that. I'm like, okay, this form that I'm using, is this the Bronx form or is this the Queens form? So all of that is going on between 8 and 1. And then I take a lunch break, and I literally schedule it because I can work. I can sit in one spot for 12 hours. I can live off of popcorn. I'm not saying this is how you should live, but this is what happens sometimes. So I'll have a lunch, and then the afternoon, when I don't need as much intellectual acuity, I guess is the best way to say it, that's all my calls. That's my clients who want to talk to me. That's possible new clients. That's COIs who want to refer their clients to me. That's my team call to answer their questions. So meetings in the afternoon and just heavy lifting in the morning so that I could be good and sharp for my clients.
Oh, those are such great tips. I wrote all of that down. So I'm like, I need to be better about defending my ex. So I'm going to use all of that. So Zach, you are international. I can only imagine if you have a client in a different time zone, what your schedule looks like. How do you handle that?
And when the judge and Lillie were speaking, I was like, oh man, I wish I were like a morning person. I'm not a morning person, but the good news for me is it's really, it's difficult to say when the morning is, right? Because sometimes you have to jump in with China, Australia, and it's like totally, they're ending their day, you're beginning yours. But legitimately, I'm not a morning person. So I start my day slow, and usually I have to stop after 2 hours because I usually take such a deep dive into things that I have to get out after 2 hours. My brain kind of needs a glass of water after a couple of hours. So I could not sit from 8 to 11 and be walking from 8 to 11 straight. I will have to walk around after every 2 hours. But what is my day like? And really, like you said, there is no typical day. Maybe let's just talk about today. And some of you know, for example, that the former president did make major changes to US tax law in 2017. And then just last week, the current president is bringing in some undoing, but also some additions. So my past few days have been spending a lot of time on the phone with a lot of our clients trying to understand, because we did a lot of planning for a lot of these clients based on what happened in 2017. Some of that is announced to be undone coming up soon. And some additional changes will be coming in. So I've been spending a lot of hours with clients to see, okay, what we did back in 1819, how should we look at that now? What if the president changes the way he's proposing to change, how is that going to affect my structure in my business, in my companies around the world? So has been a lot of that the past few days. And today really was mostly about speaking with clients and seeing how the new changes might affect their structure. So I spend how should I maybe summarize this? I spend my days living in US tax treaties, living in US tax rules for my clients. I spend my day thinking of my clients and working with my clients who 99% are multinational companies, right? Like there are some high net worth individuals, but that's more rare. It's mostly multinational companies. So we spend our days with them, working with them to see where they are present, usually US multinationals, where they are around the world, and how can we help them determine, and in some cases mitigate their tax exposure and tax responsibilities. So that is my day. I know that's overly general, but that's where probably I'm gonna stop.
No, I think it's good. That's the picture that we want to make sure we create so people understand, right? So I'm going to throw, this is a question from Susan. She would like your thoughts about the Made in America tax plan. And since you brought it up a little bit, Zach, I wanted to make sure that I throw that out there to the panelists to get your thoughts, if any, right, about what you think about the new plan.
And I'm happy to start if because I literally have been spending my days on the Made in America tax plan. And maybe I have to back up a little bit and say, not only did I get an LLM, but I loved it so much, and I discovered so much I didn't know that I went ahead and went into SJD and wrote a dissertation on international tax policy. So,
ooh, so Zach is fierce, everybody.
No, Zach loves international tax, maybe that. But I said that just to preview, to say I'm looking at this and I'm gonna comment on this based on the academic that I'm not as a partner at EY, right? Because I keep those two tracks very separate and I try to keep them both alive. So when I look at the tax plan that the president is proposing, I think it is something that is needed. Again, the academic is speaking, is something that is needed. Some of the changes that are proposed very well overdue. And then there is a line in the tax plan from last week that made me really smile. And we were talking about helping earlier, and helping real people, helping is great. But in the international tax arena, there has been a need to help developing countries. And a lot of the tax policy in the international tax arena is driven by the OECD, which some people will call the club of rich countries. And they determine the policy for international tax. They determine how the rules and where it should go. And in 2017, when the OECD came up with brand new, interesting rules to change the international tax system, I remember working so hard to get on a panel in the UK, and I paid for my own flight to go to the UK because the head of tax policy of the OECD was speaking on that panel to talk about the new changes they were announcing. And I was able to get on that panel, and I was face to face with him. And we had a discussion back and forth for a 2-hour panel. Basically, my job there was to make him uncomfortable. He didn't know I was coming for that. But what came out of that is a realization that whatever they were proposing did not take into account what the needs of the developing countries were. And by the end of that discussion, he was so uncomfortable, he never admitted that. But I bring that up because the tax plan that came out last week, it said in the line in the United States will make sure that developing countries get a fair shake on the new movement. And I took that in a smile because it was a big fight 3 years ago, and we were like speaking to a wall. So the tax plan, I see it as something that is welcomed, something that is very needed, very overdue as an academic, but of course, as a tax partner at EY, it is something that can bring a lot of headache to a lot of my clients.
Oh, this is so amazing. I wish we could go on forever. And I know Cheryl actually has a question about transferring family homes from one sibling to the next as it relates to Caribbean property. I'm going to give you Zach's email, Cheryl, so that you could talk to him. In the remaining, actually, no time that we have, I would love to get just a sentence or two from each of you, just a tip for our attendees, what you have to say about the area of tax law, the area that you practice, and any remaining tips that you have for them. So Guy, I'm going to come to you first.
I'd say my tips are, so if you're already in the LLM program, I think all the top programs that exist here are all really work hard to get you a job if you're looking for a job working in tax. I do say that tax is something that you have to have a genuine interest in, or else you'll be inundated by the kind of long hours that you're staring at the code for. And as was mentioned earlier, VITA is a great tool that you can use to give back to the community. And I don't know if they'll be having it this tax season. I know mine got canceled last year, but if they're opening up soon to help individuals that are able to file their taxes and they don't have any guidance, I think that's the best way to be able to give back. And thank you again.
No, thank you for being here. This is so amazing. Judge Jones?
Thank you, Anta. I want to reiterate something that Zach and Lillie touched on earlier. This is a discipline that requires a certain level of rigor. And I think that oftentimes, because we don't see a lot of us in this discipline and it's math oriented, we may be intimidated. And I understand that, but I also want to encourage folks, don't allow that part of it to put you off. If you are interested, lean in. Audit a tax class. If you have the opportunity, take a sit down with a tax professor. Of course, make the most use of this resource here at MBBA, which is an incredible resource. I would encourage you to reach out to the tax court. We are starting a new internship program, and we are specifically interested in reaching out to diverse communities to expose them to the world of tax. But I want to say, don't let the math part of it, don't let the rigor of it intimidate you away from it. Lean in, give it a real chance. I would encourage you to find an access point that's a point of passion for you. For me, that access point was exempt organizations. For Dr. Zach, that access point was international tax. For Lillie, that access point is estates and gift and trust tax. For Gainsley, the access point is M&A work. But find an access point. I think a lot of access points for our people have to do with how you can serve the community. There are many opportunities to do that, and that will open your eyes to how important and meaningful this work can be.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Zach?
Yes, international tax for me is probably the most exciting area of law in general, right? It is extremely challenging, it's extremely intellectually invigorating, and that can be intimidating if you think, I have to be, no, you don't have to be smart. I'm not that smart. You just have to be, you have to find your access point. I'm gonna use the words of the judge here. You have to find something you like. Don't stumble yourself into it. You're gonna struggle, right? It is demanding, especially if you are at a law firm or at a big four. It takes a lot of your time. So find a way, make sure that you like it. Don't get into it by accident. When I went to law school, I was hoping to do like, human rights and stuff like that. And it's funny because it's full circle for me, because the academic track I keep, for me, I'm doing international tax law as a human rights, really, when I work with developing countries. So it is extremely, you can probably tell, it's extremely exciting for me. I really, truly enjoy it, not only in helping my clients, but also the academic track that helps me work with governments to try to help them, especially the developing world, to help them boost their tax policies and help them try to retain as much of the revenues as they can. So my tip to you is make sure you like it. Don't get into it by accident, because you're not gonna survive. It is demanding. If you do like it, you would do really well. And as a young person getting into, whether it's a big four, a law firm, make sure that you can differentiate yourself technically. The rest will come, but people will trust you when you're technically sound. Not that you're smart, but when you take time to figure things out and make it sound serious and make yourself sound serious.
Thank you. And Lillie, final words?
Two things. One, be open to your career looking a little differently than you anticipated. I started out in the financial services industry as an interesting consultant / legal hybrid, and now I have my own firm. So the thing about tax is it's very diverse. So you might have one thing in mind, and then you get there and you realize there's 17 other things you never imagined. So be open to your career looking different than what you anticipated. And then the second thing is, whatever you focus on, don't forget to look up and share it with other people. Join a panel, volunteer, do a quick tax return for an elderly person who can't afford TurboTax, or anyone, because when you get too granular with whatever it is and you don't look up, it's like you just got all of this knowledge for yourself. And we really should be getting this knowledge for each other. So look up and share whatever you do.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to go to Elizabeth.
So I really appreciate what the other panelists have said about finding an access point. I'm speaking from the perspective of a student. So I kind of treated, I guess, finding where I would like to practice as like a, I don't know, a kind of like curiosity thing. So I started doing things like listening to podcasts, every type of podcast about cross-border transactions, about SALT, which is state and state, it's state taxes.
State and local tax, yeah.
State and local tax, thank you. International tax law, nonprofit tax law. So I kind of like started from there to figure out if I like what they're talking about, if it's fascinating. And then from there, I started to develop what maybe I would be more interested in exploring. So that's one way of approaching, I guess, the method of finding your access point.
That is a great point. Thank you so much for that tip, Elizabeth. And thank you to all of you. So I just want to leave you with a couple of nuggets. One, my two favorite, defend your morning and defend your soul. Make sure you like what you are doing, do your research, right? And also look up, share with others, right? So you are not so much into the granular that you forget what is happening, and that you also accept and acknowledge your wins. All right, no matter how small, no win is small. Acknowledge them, share them with everyone. Thank you so much to our panelists. I have a newfound love for tax, even though I'm moving a little bit away from it. I'm so blessed to have every single one of you here and to make some new friends. Thank you again to Jerome and Elizabeth for putting this panel together. Our Law student chair, Denise Mira, who was on here also for helping handle this. If you are not an MBBA member, I must ask you, see, y'all hear my girl, right? I told you she was gonna pop up at one point. If you're not an MBBA member, please join us, in making changes for our community and helping you develop personally and professionally. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe, be well, and I really hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.